Well, beautiful Saturday morning to everybody. Welcome to What About Nutrition? Now, this is the show that explores the link between nutrition and optimum health and asks the overlooked question, what about nutrition? It's on everybody's mind. Every day there is more scientific evidence and research regarding the critical importance of nutrition for the promotion of optimum health. On What About Nutrition, we'll focus today on dietary supplements, herbs, vitamins, and homeopathic remedies, what they are, what they do, and how to use them. We will also discuss diet, exercise, and other aspects of living a healthy lifestyle in the 21st century, which is not easy, as you well know. Now, sitting beside me, by the way, I'm Steve Casper, and beside me is your host, David Gall. I call him Mr. Nutrition. He's the owner of O'Fallon Nutrition and a graduate of Washington University and Huntington College of Health Sciences Comprehensive Nutrition Program. Remember, always consult your healthcare practitioner before beginning any new supplements or other changes in your lifestyle. The purpose of this show is to inform, educate, and entertain, not to diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. And David, good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Good morning, Steve.
You know, I really enjoyed last week's show. We talked about putting together a supplement regimen in your lifestyle, right. And I understand that we're going to continue on that same theme today.
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll continue with a little bit today. As you said last week, we talked about the basics of a supplement regimen. And the reason that I wanted to do a show on that is because it's not unusual at all for folks to come into our store, O'Fallon Nutrition, and they see hundreds of supplements around on the walls, and it can be overwhelming. And sometimes they feel like, well, am I supposed to take all of these? No, you're definitely not supposed to take all of them. But there is a logic to how you can put together a program. And so last week we talked about the basic four components of a supplement regimen, and those four components would be a multivitamin and mineral, what we like to call EFAs, which is your essential fatty acids. Most people know them as omega-3s and things like that. Minerals like magnesium and calcium that may or may not already be built into the multivitamin. And then the fourth component that we really feel strongly about at O'Fallon Nutrition is probiotics, the good bacteria that live within your body. So just as a review, those are the four kind of core supplements that, at least in my opinion, I think are basically essential for most people. And the reason is because they provide additional supplies of key nutrients that are most likely to be provided in insufficient amounts in our diet. And the idea here is to provide the body with abundant amounts of essential nutrients, which I want to point out, to me, that's logical. There's this huge debate, and we don't have to solve it today, of, oh, geez, aren't you getting too many nutrients? And I'm one of the folks that advocates on the side of getting enough and getting sufficient amounts of these nutrients. And in cases where it can be helpful, getting a little extra in some situations can be provide an extra benefit, let's say. And then I also want to address real quick toxicity and just kind of point out that the body does treat these nutrients as food. They're found in food in nature. They're still food even in a vitamin. And the nutrients most likely to cause overdoses tend to be like your fat-soluble vitamins, such as A, D, E, even vitamin K. And the supplement manufacturers are aware of this. It's not really in anybody's best interest to kill their customers, I found, So the supplement manufacturers that have been around for 30, 40, 50 years, they have nutritionists that work for them that formulate these products, and they really put a lot of thought into not overdoing it as well. And the idea is to get optimum amounts.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Just recently, I have a friend whose husband went into the doctor, had some health problems, but they realized that he was the word she used was like over supplementing or something, or over vitamins, a little bit of vitamin, and it had to be the A and E and the K and the things you're talking about. But I mean, most supplements, you can't really have that problem, can you?
It's hard with a lot of them. I'll tell you what, I think it's a much more common issue, even statistically.
With vitamins.
Yeah, to have deficiencies in nutrients. And I feel like there is a paranoia about overdoing vitamins and a confusion about whether or not vitamins are drugs, because often they come in a pill form.
Yeah.
And that said, there can be specific situations where somebody can have vitamin D toxicity, although it's very, very rare. It can happen. Vitamin A toxicity is probably one of the easiest things to do. And the supplement industry picked up on that 2 or 3 decades ago and started really limiting the amount of vitamin A found in multivitamins, and specifically using that form beta-carotene that can't actually exceed a toxic amount because the body makes vitamin A from it, and it chooses how much to make.
Ooh, that's cool.
But yeah, it is a legitimate thing, and that's why it's good sometimes to get a little advice. Also, sometimes maybe you don't want to continuously double up on nutrients. Sometimes people take a multivitamin that already has really high levels of vitamins.
That is
and then they
true.
add to it.
That is very true, because it might be easy. And then what you eat has vitamins in it.
Sure. There's some truth to that. The funny thing is, folks like myself have so little respect for our food supply, frankly, that I hate to say it, but to some extent, I look at food as like providing relatively minimal nutrition. However, but the better your diet is, yes, the more nutrients you are getting from your food. And it takes a little bit of the stress off of needing to supplement as much.
Okay. There are a couple of, I'm just going to throw this out just because my own years of learning about this myself or studying, which I've learned 10 times that or 100 times since we started doing this show. But there's 2 that we talked about in the recent past that I understand you pretty much can take a lot of, and that's vitamin C and the omega-3s. Yeah,
that's a good point. And so let's address that real quick. Omega-3s are a perfect example, basically, with this diet thing. As we talked about a little bit last week, the essential fatty acids in our food supply, specifically let's just keep it down to the omega-3s, they're very, very deficient. In a nutshell, they are destroyed by a number of factors, time and heat being the biggest ones. Everybody knows, the oils that we cook with tend to be clear and odorless and tasteless, right? Like vegetable oil or canola oil, which is actually also known as rapeseed oil, but they gave it the friendlier sounding name of canola oil. And those are oils that are shelf stable, can last a long time, but they're extremely high in these omega-6 fats. So we hear about those oils like, oh, they're cholesterol free. Isn't that wonderful? Well, that's true, but they're providing a humongous amount of inflammatory fat that actually has to be balanced by omega-3s.
Oh.
So the human diet is supposed to have, depending on which expert you talk to, either 3 parts omega-3, 3 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3, or just simply 2 parts omega-6 to 1 part. So let's use that for easy numbers. So 2 parts of this omega-6 fat to 1 part of this omega-3 fat is what the ideal ratio is. The reason I'm saying that is when they measure the traditional American's diet, we're consuming something like 20 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3.
Wow.
So this humongous imbalance. And one issue alone to focus on there is that those omega-6 fats are used by the body to make inflammatory prostaglandins. And we can think of prostaglandins as like a cellular hormone. So my point is that we eat tremendous amounts of these fats that are pro-inflammatory, that cause inflammation or contribute to it. And those are the fats that we're using as cooking fats. Those are the fats that are found in meat. And I'm not somebody who thinks meat's terrible, but meat is a big source of these inflammatory omega-6 fats.
Wow. So, yeah, like if I'm or steak and
right.
Like
and it's known as arachidonic acid. And there's a process known as the arachidonic acid cascade that translates this type of fat into these inflammatory compounds. So, point being, it takes a lot of omega-3 just to provide balance to these omega-6s.
Fascinating.
Just if you're trying to get your inflammation balanced alone. And yes, it's hard to get enough omega-3, although technically, eventually it can be overdosed, but it's incredibly rare.
Now, I take normally around, I'd say 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 a day. So the interesting point. So let's talk about that for just a moment. Normal American's diet, when we look on the supplement facts panel or the nutrition facts panel on the back of food, and it talks about like a standard 2,500 calorie per day diet, which would be for a person that was smaller than you. And in that diet, if they're getting something like 30% fat, then they're consuming something around 60 grams of fat a day. Okay, so let's say that 40 of those grams are omega-6 fat, which is easily possible. Then if we wanted to have that 2-to-1 ratio in our diet, we would need to consume 20 grams of omega-3 just to balance that omega-6. Wow, okay.
Now, very few people do that, but I say that to illustrate the point that often when consumers or regular folks are taking supplements, in some situations, such as omega-3, like in your situation, you're taking 3,000 milligrams a day, you're not even getting up to optimal.
Yeah.
You're just getting enough to help and provide some balance, which is good. And for a lot of people, that's as far as they'll go.
Or at the same time, besides the balance with omega-6s, you're also, aren't you, with the omega-3s, benefiting your heart and some other things? Or does that cancel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because this inflammation thing causes inflammation in our arteries and veins in our cardiovascular system.
Right.
And there's a lot of science showing how that directly contributes to our arteriosclerosis, et cetera. And then also, yes, they're providing fats like DHA, which is a component of the
Right.
heart. So I don't mean to say that, oh, geez, if you're not taking this enormous amount, you're not doing yourself good.
Yeah.
I just say it to point out that
There's a lot of room there. There's a lot of headroom there.
as an example with fish oil, a little bit is good, and at a certain point, more is better.
And I think you can verify this, when you go buy fish oil or omega-3s at No Fellow Nutrition or anywhere else, but hopefully No Fellow Nutrition.
Best place to get them.
Best place to get them, right, because you guys know what you're doing there. It comes in packaging. It comes in different the pills are about the same size, but how much is in there? Each one of them, it
Yeah.
varies. Because I've
Right.
got, at home, I've got 1,500 milligram pills. I take 2 of those, and I've noticed a lot of them are 300 to 600 apiece.
Yeah, and it depends on how they measure it. So consumers get confused about this all the time. In a nutshell, you have the first measurement, which is just how much oil is in the pill. So let's say it's 1,000 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams soft gel. You got 1,000 milligrams of fish oil. Now that fish oil has other components that are the actual omega-3s, and they're not all of that 1,000 milligrams. And they're usually labeled as DHA and EPA if it's a fish oil. And so what you can do is you can actually look at the number of milligrams of DHA and EPA and think of that as your active ingredient.
Right.
And a lot of the studies measure different amounts of those nutrients on various factors like ADD, depression, heart disease, raising HDL cholesterol, things like that. And so consumers come in all the time with a little confusion on that. And before the break, I just like to boil it down on this point of pay attention to A, how much actual oil is in it, but B, more importantly, how much of the specific omega-3s, DHA, and EPA are in it. They're your active ingredients.
All right, folks, well, it's time for our first break. We'll be back. You're listening to O'Fallon Nutrition's What About Nutrition with Mr. Nutrition, David Gall. We will be right back.